Picture a massive hill rising from flat land, taller than a modern 10-story building, perfectly shaped, carefully layered, and built long before machines, metal tools, or even the wheel were part of daily life in that region. No carts rolling across dirt paths, no oxen dragging heavy loads, no cranes lifting earth into place. Just people, land, and an idea powerful enough to organize thousands of hands over years, sometimes decades. That's the reality behind the great earthen mounds built by indigenous cultures across North America. These weren't random piles of dirt. They were engineered landscapes, shaped with intention, precision, and a deep understanding of materials and environment. And the way they were built reveals something that often gets overlooked. Technology doesn't always look like machines. Sometimes it looks like coordination, patience, and knowledge passed down through generations. Take a place like Cahokia, near present-day Illinois. At its peak, it was one of the largest cities in North America, home to thousands of people. Rising above it all stood Monk's Mound, a structure that still dominates the landscape today. It reaches about 100 feet high and stretches across a base larger than many modern buildings. And here's the part that usually stops people in their tracks. It was built using an estimated 22 million cubic feet of earth, all moved by hand. No shortcuts, no hidden advanced tools, just human effort, organized at a scale that rivals major construction projects anywhere in the ancient world. So how did that actually work on the ground? It started with the simplest tool imaginable: a basket. Workers would dig soil using tools made from wood, stone, or even shells. The earth wasn't just scooped up randomly. Different types of soil were selected for different purposes. Clay, for example, could help hold shape and resist water. Sand might be used for drainage. This wasn't guesswork. It was applied knowledge built through experience. Once the soil was gathered, it went into baskets. These weren't tiny containers. Many could carry loads of 30 to 50 pounds. Then came the movement. People formed lines, sometimes long chains stretching from the digging site to the construction area. Baskets moved from hand to hand or were carried individually, step by step across the site. Imagine that rhythm. Lift, carry, dump, return, over and over again. Not for an hour, not for a day, but repeated across seasons. And this is where scale really starts to matter. A single person carrying one basket doesn't seem like much, but multiply that by hundreds, sometimes thousands of workers, each making dozens of trips in a day, and suddenly the numbers add up fast. Over time, those loads of earth become layers. Those layers become platforms. And those platforms become something massive. The mound didn't just rise in one continuous push. It grew gradually. Construction often happened in stages, with each phase adding new layers and reshaping the structure. This approach actually made the mound stronger. Each layer was compacted before the next one was added, creating a dense, stable core. Compaction mattered. Loose soil would settle unevenly, especially under the weight of future layers. So workers likely tamped down the earth using their feet or simple tools, pressing it into place. This wasn't rushed. Stability was the goal, not speed. And then there's the shape. These mounds weren't just tall, they were carefully designed. Many had sloped sides to prevent erosion. Some featured terraces, creating step-like levels that helped manage weight distribution and water runoff. Rain wasn't ignored, it was planned for. The builders understood that water could weaken a structure if not handled properly. So drainage became part of the design. Certain layers allowed water to pass through instead of pooling. The placement of different soils helped control how moisture moved inside the mound. Even the location of the mound itself mattered. Many were built near rivers, which provided resources and transportation routes, but they were placed high enough to avoid flooding. That kind of decision-making doesn't happen by accident. It points to planning. Not just short-term planning, but long-term thinking that considered how the structure would hold up over years and generations. And none of this could happen without organization. Building something like a 100-foot mound required coordination on a massive scale. People had to gather materials, transport them, shape the mound, and maintain the site. That suggests leadership. Individuals or groups responsible for directing labor, making decisions, and keeping the process moving. But it wasn't just about control. There had to be shared purpose. These projects likely carried deep cultural and spiritual meaning. Many mounds served as ceremonial centers or burial sites. Some supported structures like temples or homes for leaders. Others were aligned with astronomical events, marking solstices or other important moments in the calendar. That kind of significance changes how people approach the work. It's not just labor, it's participation in something meaningful. That motivation can drive consistency and commitment in ways that simple obligation can't. And timing played a role too. Farming societies have natural rhythms. There are periods of intense activity, like planting and harvesting, and periods when labor is more available. Mound construction likely took advantage of those quieter seasons, turning downtime into progress on these large-scale projects. So instead of competing with survival needs, the building process was woven into the community's way of life. Now, one question often comes up: why not use wheels? After all, wheels existed in other parts of the world at the time. The answer isn't as simple as they didn't know about them. It's more about practicality. The environments where many of these mounds were built weren't ideal for wheeled transport. Forested areas, uneven terrain, and soft ground would have made carts difficult to use. Without suitable roads, wheels don't offer much advantage. In fact, they can become a burden. Carrying baskets, on the other hand, is flexible. It works on narrow paths, through trees, over uneven ground. It doesn't require infrastructure. And when distances are relatively short, as they often were between soil sources and construction sites, it's surprisingly efficient. So the absence of wheels wasn't a limitation in the way it might seem today. It was a choice shaped by environment and practicality. And then there's the question of animals. Large domesticated animals like horses and oxen weren't part of these societies in the same way they were in other regions. But again, that doesn't mean the work couldn't be done. It just meant the system relied entirely on human effort and coordination. And clearly, that system worked. Over time, these methods produced not just individual mounds, but entire complexes. Landscapes filled with multiple structures, each serving a role. Some were conical, others flat-topped, some shaped like animals or symbols. The variety shows creativity as well as technical skill. And despite being made of earth, many of these mounds have lasted for centuries. That durability says a lot about the techniques used. Proper layering, compaction, and drainage can turn simple soil into something remarkably resilient. It also highlights something easy to overlook. These builders understood their materials deeply. They didn't need modern engineering formulas to know what worked. They learned through observation, experience, and tradition. Knowledge was passed down, refined, and applied again and again. So when looking at a 100-foot mound, it's not just about the height or the volume of earth, it's about the system behind it. A system built on cooperation, planning, and a clear understanding of both environment and purpose. And the scale of that system becomes even more impressive when considering how long these projects could take. Some mounds were expanded over generations. One group might begin the structure, and another would continue it years later, adding new layers or reshaping the design. That kind of continuity requires strong cultural memory. People had to know not just how to build, but why they were building. The meaning of the mound had to be preserved and shared, so that future work stayed aligned with its original purpose. It turns construction into something more than a task. It becomes a legacy. And within that legacy, every basket of soil matters. Every step taken from the digging site to the mound adds up. It's easy to focus on the finished structure and forget the countless small actions that made it possible. But those actions are the real story. Because in the end, the question isn't just how these mounds were built without wheels or animals. It's how communities organize themselves to achieve something so large using only what they had available. The answer isn't hidden. It's right there in the process. Simple tools, smart techniques, and a level of coordination that turned individual effort into something monumental. And that's where the real weight of these structures lies, not just in the earth that forms them, but in the human effort behind every layer. Picking up right where that leaves off, the story of these mounds starts to feel less like a mystery and more like a slow, steady accumulation of decisions made correctly over and over again. Think about what it takes to keep a project going, not just for weeks, but for years. People have to show up. Materials have to be gathered. The structure has to hold together as it grows taller and wider. And perhaps most importantly, everyone involved has to stay aligned on what the final goal actually is. That kind of consistency doesn't happen randomly. It suggests a system where knowledge is shared clearly and expectations are understood. When a worker adds a basket of soil to a mound, that action has to fit into a larger plan. The angle of the slope, the type of soil being added, even the location where that soil is placed, all of it matters. And yet, none of this required written blueprints in the modern sense. The plans likely existed in a combination of tradition, leadership, and hands-on guidance. Experienced builders could demonstrate techniques. Leaders could direct where work was needed most. Over time, the process itself became the instruction manual. That's one of the most fascinating parts of this entire system. The knowledge wasn't locked away in documents or controlled by a small group. It was lived. It was practiced. It was visible in every stage of construction. Now consider the physical challenge. Carrying a 40-pound basket of soil once is manageable. Doing it dozens of times in a day is demanding. Doing it repeatedly across weeks requires endurance. But when that effort is shared across a large group, the strain on any one individual becomes more manageable. This is where community plays a central role. The work wasn't isolated, it was collective. People moved together, worked together, and likely even rested together. That shared experience can change how effort is perceived. Instead of feeling like an endless task, it becomes part of a rhythm. And rhythm matters. Repetition creates efficiency. Workers would have developed patterns, routes that minimized effort, methods that made lifting easier, ways to distribute weight evenly in the baskets. Small improvements, repeated thousands of times, lead to significant gains. Then there's the question of how these builders maintained accuracy as the mound grew. It's one thing to build a small structure. It's another to keep proportions consistent as the height increases. Slopes need to remain stable. The top platform needs to stay level. This likely involved constant observation and adjustment. Builders could step back, assess the shape, and make corrections as needed. If one side began to rise too quickly, more material could be added elsewhere. Now, as this comes to a close, if this kind of deep dive into history and human ingenuity keeps the curiosity going, make sure to stay connected. Subscribing, liking, and sharing helps keep more stories like this coming, each one unpacking the details behind things that often get overlooked.